The U.S. sets a 20% tariff on Taiwan, but President Lai Ching-te says that does not mean tariff discussions are over.
我们最终的目标是既争取对登关税能够到合理，然后对台湾最有利。
Would Taiwan be able to withstand a Chinese blockade? A new war game explores that scenario.
制度杀人，立刻改革。
Firefighters call for better workplace protections as more of their colleagues die in the line of duty. Plus, Taiwan is a foodie paradise, and vendors are working to make it a sustainable one. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. In a long-awaited decision, Taiwan will face a 20% tariff on most of its exports to the United States following a new executive order issued by U.S. President Donald Trump. It comes just one day after Taiwan's cabinet said they had reached a consensus on a deal with the U.S. As Chris Gorin reports, the new tariff rate has created as many questions as it has answers.
Taiwan President Lai Ching-te addresses the nation from the presidential office, following a White House announcement of tariffs on most countries across the world, including Taiwan, which will see most of its exports levied at 20%, starting in 7 days.
我们最终的目标是既争取对登关税能够到合理，然后对台湾最有利，同时也争取232的关税。 对台湾的 ICT 产业还有电子零组件产业不至于造成冲击。
The 20% rate is a reduction of sorts from the 32% originally announced by the Trump administration in April. However, it's still more than several of Taiwan's neighboring countries, such as South Korea and Japan, a fact that's drawing criticism from Taiwan's opposition parties.
希望在连续的谈判过程当中，能够把28%的税率调降下来，不然台湾最大的竞争对手就是日本跟韩国。如果他们都是15%，台湾20%，那未来我们如何要跟日本、韩国竞争？
The announcement comes after Taiwan's cabinet said it had reached a consensus on technical terms of a deal with the U.S. But Lai says both sides still need to have a final meeting before more details can be revealed. Another major concern for Taiwan is tariffs that can be levied under a law known as Section 232. Under the law, Taiwan's most valuable exports, such as semiconductors and servers, which have until now been exempt, could see sector-specific tariffs of an unknown amount.
It's a possibility in the sense that if you look at some of the tariff actions that the Trump administration has taken under Section 232 this time around, they've ranged as high as 50%. Right, so that is the tariff rate that is applicable to steel and aluminum and now copper.
The U.S. Commerce Department investigation is expected to be completed within 2 weeks. Experts say if the tariffs are applied to Taiwan semiconductors, it could hurt not only Taiwanese companies, but also the booming AI industry in the U.S.
I think the impact could be very significant because essentially the tariff will be paid by the customer or the buyers in the U.S. right? So essentially, it will undermine, I think, a lot of the investment in semiconductor and AI industry in U.S.
President Lai says Taiwan's goal is to make a deal as soon as possible so that the 20% tariff will be only temporary. But some here say it might not be so easy.
As Trump mentioned, the tariff is the most beautiful word is in the dictionary, and we will see the Section 232. We may also see other kind of the different form of the tariff, for example, the anti-dumping, the countervailing duty tariff, and so on. So we have to to face this kind of a challenge in the future. This is just the beginning.
The Trump administration has left open the opportunity for most countries to make deals to bring their tariffs down. If Taiwan's deal is as close as Lai says it is, perhaps Taiwan's chance isn't far away. Eason Chun and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
After the U.S. Trump administration announced it would replace 20% tariffs on most Taiwanese goods, industries across Taiwan are reacting to the news, many expressing concern about how the tariffs would affect their businesses and livelihoods. Cadence Quaranta has more.
Starting next week, most Taiwanese goods exported to the U.S. will be subject to a 20% tariff, a rate announced Thursday by the Trump administration that Taiwan President Lai Ching-te has been quick to call temporary, emphasizing that tariff negotiations would continue as the country seeks a lower rate. But the announcement is already raising concerns among many industries in Taiwan. Some fishers say they're afraid for their livelihoods, especially those selling swordfish, as around 70% of Taiwan's swordfish are exported to the U.S. and will be heavily impacted by tariffs. Taiwan's orchid industry may also take a hit, with around 40% of Taiwan's orchids exported to the U.S.
因为我们的利润没那么高，一节20%我们好像也是负担不起。基本上讲到后面，不管是哪一方是买方承担还是卖方承担，到后面也都是消费者，也是都会出问题。所以说，基本上我们还是希望政府可以帮我们说谈到更好的关税这样子。
Other industries also say they anticipate impacts on any goods that are imported from or exported to the U.S.
我想影响应该是相当的大了哦，就是说包含我们的啤酒，进口到美国铝罐的关税，那以及我们整个在海外所有的经销商，目前因为关税的问题，大家对于下订单都还是趋于保守。
Though others say they had already made preparations, which may limit the tariff's effects in the short term.
其实关税对我们在进口食材的这个部分呢，当然多多少少会有些影响。那么我们这边呢，因为之前是整个集团在做一个国际的整体的这个采购，所以其实在采购的这个协商这个优势上呢，我们都是预先就已经先签好了这个合约，所以短期之内呢，或者是在这个今年度，其实对我们的这个影响是比较小的。
Taiwan's opposition parties have also criticized the tariff rate, questioning how Taiwan will compete with neighboring competitors like Japan and South Korea, which both got lower tariff rates at 15%, and emphasizing that fluctuations in Taiwan's currency would mean an even higher burden on exporters. But Taiwan's ruling party, headed by President Lai, is emphasizing that the negotiations are not finished and that negotiators will work hard to achieve a better deal for Taiwan and for industries across the country. Andy Xue and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's economy soared almost 8% in the second quarter of 2025, the highest quarterly growth in 4 years. That figure is 2.7 percentage points higher than what was predicted in May. Meanwhile, exports shot up by 34% between April and June, reaching over $150 billion. Officials cited strong demand for AI and new technology applications, as well as orders placed ahead of the August 1st U.S. tariff deadline. The government says it will wait until August 15th to release its annual growth forecast after it considers the tariff impact. A new bill in the U.S. Congress takes aim at foreign governments that threaten or intimidate activists, journalists, and diaspora groups beyond their borders. The Transnational Repression Policy Act seeks to protect people from surveillance, physical intimidation, and coercion by authoritarian regimes. Senator Jeff Merkley, the former chair of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, pointed to Beijing as a frequent offender. He said the Chinese government often targets minority groups, including Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Tibetans, and others. A U.S. think tank recently wargamed a Chinese blockade of Taiwan. Its findings show that even limited military actions could kill thousands. Our reporter Alan Liu has the story.
Thousands die, the U.S. loses hundreds of aircraft, and Taiwan runs out of gas. These are the possible outcomes of a Chinese blockade of Taiwan in 2028. According to a wargame report by CSIS, a Washington-based think tank focused on geopolitical issues. A potential attack on Taiwan started to grab the world's attention back in 2022, when China reacted strongly to then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visits to the country.
When we say blockade, people's natural thoughts turn to the shipping, which is an extremely important part of it in many of the scenarios. But at higher escalation levels, at higher risk tolerances, China could directly attack Taiwan and has probably tens of thousands of close-range ballistic missiles that it has built in order to do that.
In the simulations, Chinese President Xi Jinping orders the China Coast Guard and maritime militia to position themselves around Taiwan, attempting to stop shipping headed for the country. The action disrupts international trade and the world economy. Taiwan rejects China's legal arguments and decides to resist. The casualties could include thousands of deaths, and for the U.S., a loss of hundreds of aircraft and dozens of warships. This raises a question over whether the U.S. would be willing to intervene in a real blockade.
Blockade is covered under the Taiwan Relations Act, and yet there may be more reluctance. This may be a harder sell for the American public, or political leaders may be more reluctant to get involved in it if it is a blockade.
Without U.S. intervention, the report says Chinese submarines and sea mines would still manage to destroy 40% of ships trying to reach Taiwan, even with the maximum efforts by Taiwan's military and U.S. supply munitions. To make it worse, Taiwan would be at risk of running out of natural gas in 10 days, losing nearly half of its power-generating capacity. Taiwan would urgently need ships to run the blockade. Airlifts, submarines, and smaller boats, if they could make it past the Chinese lines, could only deliver a fraction of what Taiwan normally needs. However, a blockade doesn't necessarily give China an advantage.
For China, it requires expending a lot of military capabilities, especially at higher levels of escalation, for unclear gains.
For example, a blockade would also mean high casualties for China. In two wargame scenarios, conflicts peaked with U.S. strikes on China and Chinese missile attacks on Guam and Japan, and they end up with U.S. forces inflicting heavy damage on China. A blockade would also alert other nearby countries and cost China key military resources needed for a full-scale invasion of Taiwan.
The United States and its allies and partners need to prepare to counter and end the blockade. Most important among those steps is thinking about off-ramps to offer Beijing. Beijing can't feel like it's painted into a corner and that the only way out is continued escalation. Somehow this conflict needs to end, but without Taiwan making substantive concessions to China.
War games like these are effective tools to play out worst-case scenarios and find ways out of them. They form part of a defensive strategy that leaves no scenario unthinkable, so that military planners and civilian leaders in Taiwan and the U.S. can prepare for real-world possibilities and work towards better outcomes. Howard Chang and Ellen Liu for TaiwanPlus.
Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will give a keynote speech at a major security forum in Taipei. This year's annual Ketagalan Forum will take place on August 5th. It will bring together experts in security, civil defense, and economics from Europe, the U.S., Japan, and other countries in the Indo-Pacific region. The annual security dialogue has welcomed many former world leaders for past keynotes. Coming up after the break, a new report calls the killings of people seeking aid in Gaza a war crime.
How does Taiwan stay on the forefront of innovation in a world of uncertain tariffs, wars, and shifting geopolitics? Get answers and more, from award-winning programs to exclusive Mandarin dramas. Download the TaiwanPlus app to any device today. No ads, no bias, just facts. TaiwanPlus.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
And welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. Taiwan's firefighters gathered outside the legislature demanding better workplace protections. That's after the tragic deaths of 2 firefighters last month. AC Wells has more.
10年殉职43，10年殉职43，何时出入能平安？何时出入能平安？
10 years, 43 lives lost, and still Taiwan's firefighters here said they're being denied the legal and safety protections they deserve. Their demand is simple. They want firefighters to be included in the Occupational Safety and Health Act, a law aimed to prevent occupational accidents and protect workers. But since they're public servants, they're not covered by that.
我们认为职业安全卫生法是所有受雇者都应该要得到的最基本的安全保障。那我们认为消防员就算是公务人员，他也是属于政府的受雇者，那他也应该要有资格来具有这样子最基本的治安保障。
Calls for legal change have taken on renewed urgency after the deaths of 2 firefighters in New Taipei in early July during a rescue operation. Currently, firefighters are governed by the Fire Services Act, which has the fire department as both the implementing and supervisory body. Advocates argue this creates a clear conflict of interest, enabling the government to evade oversight and avoid accountability when tragedies occur.
内政部跟新北市消防局可以求人签裁判，现在的机制就是求人签裁判。我们为什么要纳入治安法？因为机关永远是解释游戏规则的人，然后牺牲、死掉、受伤的都是我们基层。
As frustration grows over the authorities' handling of firefighter deaths over the last decade, protesters here say the ruling Democratic Progressive Party has responded only by saying a broad social consensus is needed before change can happen. And while the opposition has proposed a draft amendment to include public servants under the Occupational Safety and Health Act, the bill has only passed its first reading, with no subsequent hearings scheduled.
制度杀人，制度杀人，立刻改革，立刻改革，制度杀人，制度杀人，立刻改革，立刻改革。
As Taiwan's firefighters prepare to head out on their next mission, still without the protections they want, they say the real emergency is legislative, and the alarm is still sounding. Kaohsiung and Izzy Wells for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's Premier Zhuo Rongtai says personnel adjustments in the government need to be made to respond to public opinion. Zhuo's comments come amid speculations that the cabinet may be reshuffled after last month's failed recalled elections. But he emphasizes that the focus of his cabinet members is now on flood disaster recovery, U.S. tariff negotiations, and working with the opposition. Meanwhile, the opposition parties say the recall results are a reflection of public anger with President Lai Ching-te's administration and that Zhuo should take responsibility and step down. A new report from Human Rights Watch says that new aid distribution sites in Gaza managed by Israel have resulted in the deaths of hundreds of aid seekers. As Israel's war in Gaza nears 2 years, over 60,000 people have died inside the enclave, including over 150 from malnutrition, half of them children. International pressure on Israel to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza is growing. Israel is overseeing deliveries, saying it wants to make sure they don't get into the hands of Hamas. But hundreds of people have died in shootings at aid distribution sites, which have caused more international criticism. To learn more about aid distribution in Gaza, our reporter Tiffany Wong spoke with Ahmed Benchemzi, spokesperson for Human Rights Watch.
What are your findings about the new aid distribution sites that have popped up in Gaza over the past few months?
Our main finding is that the system that the Israeli forces has put forward with the help of private contractors is not only flawed and militarized, but it also turned aid distribution into bloodbath. According to the UN, the Israeli military killed at least 766 Palestinians attempting to obtain aid. We have many testimonies of people who were there Palestinians who were trying to get aid, who said that I saw a tank blow up the head of the person next to me. We were walking on the road that the Israeli military told us to walk on to get to the aid distribution site, and they started shooting at us from
How do these controversial aid sites work, and where do they get their funding from?
The mechanism is it's an entity called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a very ironic name given what's happening on the ground. And it's operating on 4 distribution sites that were selected and constructed by the Israeli military. The US Congress should move on that. It should require notifications of any additional funding, because there has been already an announcement of $30 million in funding for the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And the report on how US funds are being used currently, including an assessment of effectiveness of the aid. That's the bare minimum that the US Congress should do.
Recently, France, the UK, and Canada announced that if Israel does not agree to a ceasefire by September, they would recognize a Palestinian state. Does international pressure like this help the civilians in Gaza?
If that could be a way to pressure the Israeli government into doing very urgent measures consisting in opening, stop, not firing at civilians anymore, and letting aid flow in freely in a way that is respectful to their human dignity, I hope that leads to that. But it doesn't sound for me like the most urgent thing to do. We're talking about abiding by their obligations under the Genocide Conventions. And the Genocide Convention states that governments, all of them, all signatories, should use all forms of leverage, including targeted sanctions, arms embargoes, suspension of trade agreements, to stop Israelis' ongoing atrocities. Again, we're talking about huge proportion war crimes. We're talking about crimes against humanity, forced displacement, ethnic cleansing, acts of genocide. We're beyond shedding light on the situation. States have to move pursuant to their obligations under international law, and specifically the 1948 Genocide Convention that they signed, all of them.
That was Ahmed Benchemzi from Human Rights Watch. Heavy rain in southern Taiwan has left at least 2 people dead after their car plunged into a valley in Kaohsiung. Rescuers are searching for 3 other people who were in the vehicle. Continued severe weather is causing more damage in the region. In Jiayi, a 20-ton boulder crashed onto the Alishan Highway, while Gukeng Township in Yunlin reported 20 to 30 landslides along major roads. In Taichung, in central Taiwan, flooding filled the underground parking lot of an elementary school, forcing dozens of car owners to move their vehicles. In response to the storm damage, Premier Zhou Rongtai announced that home repair assistance will be fast-tracked. A special act for typhoon recovery could be sent to lawmakers next week. As an island nation, Taiwan's seas provide a bevy of delicacies. That's why seafood played a central role at this year's Taiwan Culinary Exhibition. But where there's seafood, there are questions about sustainability. Food, food, and more food. If you can eat it, you'll find it here. This is the Taiwan Culinary Exhibition. It's a celebration of the country's treasured food culture. Taiwan takes its food so seriously that even the president attended the expo's opening ceremony.
3, 2, 1!
The Taiwan Visitors Association, which promotes local tourism, organized this exhibition. As the government continues trying to bring overseas visitor numbers back to pre-COVID levels, industry experts say that leveraging Taiwan's food scene should be a priority to meet that goal.
我们所做的每一个民调，就是你为什么会来台湾玩呢？每个人答案都是美食。韩国、日本、美国、菲律宾答案都一样，所以台湾的美食扬名全球。
The theme of this year's exhibit is seafood. Taiwan is an island country and known for its bountiful seas. But at a time when overfishing is a global concern, there's one question that pops up when talking about ocean delicacies. A point of focus at culinary expos like this is sustainability. How do we go about consuming and producing as much as we do without depleting the Earth's natural resources too quickly? There are dedicated speakers and exhibits on sustainability, and it's on the mind of many of the big players here.
我们的这个自助餐厅呢，它是特别的跟台东的这个渔船做契作，等于我们这个鱼呢，我们没有挑品种，就是它这个渔船捕到的鱼，我们全部都收，就不会因为说这个是不要的品种，那你可能就浪费了。所以我们也这个非常积极的做到海洋的这个生态永续链。
Sustainability is about protecting the environment. Human-caused climate change can have severe consequences in Taiwan. That's especially true for smaller operations, like for this fish farmer from Pingtung in southern Taiwan, who says they got lucky after dodging damage from recent torrential rains. Even so, environmental impacts are always back of mind.
天气太热的时候，我的鱼可能也会不吃饭，或者是雨下太大的时候，我的海水的盐度也会变淡。
And it's not just the seafood industry that's thinking about sustainable practices. Pingtung has an up-and-coming chocolate industry, and purveyors from there are thinking about how to protect their products' future.
国外因为是很多制造国家的产区，树的话没有办法就是顾好，它才有那个量少的一个风险。
In many ways, this expo is a feast. But instead of indulgent excess, this feast is mindful of its environmental impact. People here try to take only what they need and leave enough for the earth. Fu Huahong and Leslie Liao in Taipei for TaiwanPlus. And thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out this corn maze in Germany shaped like a map of Europe. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.